Hi, I'm John Harrison, and I am an electrical and computer engineer. I work for a firm in town called PWI, and I also teach engineering here at Wichita State. I'm also a concertmaster of the symphony here, Wichita Symphony, and I used to teach violin here as a professor. And I've been lucky enough to get to collaborate in a large scale with many people, but especially these two people in a project, a 10-minute work that Mary Ellen Childs here has written. She's a composer from Minneapolis. And we were all put in touch with her through Michael Holland, who runs the Nashville Percussion Ensemble. Michael is the one who put us all together, who actually made this all happen, sort of the glue that introduced us to each other and saw the possibility for the collaboration.
Well, I saw the possibility for a great party. So this is like old home week, working with you, John, and Mary Ellen, and Jerry, and the crew at WSU. I mean, I spent some years here, living here. I'm down at Vanderbilt now, in Nashville. Artistic director of Vortex, which is a group that does this very kind of thing that seeks to push outward and, openly courts choreographers, filmmakers, engineers, this kind of a thing to create something that's uniquely fresh. And I think it taps into that early spirit of Lou Harrison and Harry Parch and Cage and all these guys, Henry Cowell, who were truly experimenting and always looking to do something new.
And you had some affiliation with Wichita State University and the Percussion Ensemble?
I did. I started working, I got to know J.C. Combs. And, gracious guy that he is, he opens his door and says, "What do you want to do?" So I would come in and bring in the silent film work I've done and work in that capacity. And through JC, of course, got to know Jerry, his successor. And Jerry and I have been interested in collaborative work. He's really engaged with the kind of stuff that the tradition that I've come from. And just working with him and having that kind of enthusiasm to work with as a colleague and as a friend is a real treat. I mean, it's just a kind of energy that builds on its own, which is what prompted me to bring you two together with Jerry, with Vortex down in Vanderbilt, to create this as a joint project.
The idea of the percussion ensemble, and specifically the WSU percussion ensemble, since I've taken over, and is to try and create an experience for the audience that they will have never seen before. That's the real essence of what we're trying to do, is create something a little bit more unexpected, so that when people come to see it, they think, wow, every time I come to the WSU percussion ensemble, I see an event. And I think, I don't mean to brag in any way, but I think the numbers are showing that. We have 9 members to 12 members in our percussion ensemble, and we are getting large audiences. And for that, I am extremely grateful. But I think part of the reason is because we are doing really imaginative things.
So Still Life is a piece you wrote in 1986. You said it was the first piece that you wrote for percussion that really captured where you were really exploring the motion. What inspired you to write the work?
As a composer, I write concert pieces of all kinds, everything from solo accordion to string quartet to concert band and everything in between. But I also have a large body of work that incorporates visual image and movement into the work itself. And most of this is for percussion, because percussionists have a very physical playing technique. It's easy to really make use of that. Percussionists are open to doing all kinds of unusual things that you might ask them to do. And a lot of this work is created for my own percussion ensemble, Crash, which Michael played in for a number of years. Still Life, the piece Still Life, was actually the very first percussion piece where I consciously thought about how the players move and sort of writing movement into the piece as an integral part of the musical composition. It was done originally in 1986, and it's set up so that the bass drums are set vertically, and the players play each side of the bass drums. 2 different players share a bass drum. The instruments are set in one long row in a palindrome, so that the set up as kind of a mirror image of one another, and there are special sticking patterns that are specified for the players that make use of certain recurring visual movement motives that come back. For instance, the center player does this crossings pattern where he plays here and then crosses and plays like this, and that's something that recurs throughout the piece.
And if I can interject, this is what makes this intriguing, because it's almost opposite, almost antithetical to how you'd approach it in an orchestral setting. You wouldn't necessarily want to spread your instruments that way. You'd be looking for the path of the shortest distance, the shortest amount of movement sometimes, so that you can get a pure musical result. But what this does is set you up for this other aspect.
That's right, and if percussionists look at this piece, they'll notice that some of the playing techniques are a little unusual. The sticking techniques are not the most comfortable. So they kind of have to adjust, and they have to be willing to reinvent their technique in order to get these certain visual patterns that we're looking for. Then Michael, of course, who knew my work so well and is, always brainstorming and thinking about ideas, kind of came to me and said, I think you should work with these guys in Wichita, and described to me what they did and how we might be able to overlay what they do with technology on top of this already existing percussion piece. And I do remember the first time I spoke on the phone with you, John, I felt right away, here's a kindred artistic mind. I just had a feeling right away that although you are sort of the technology end of things, you're also an artist yourself. And so you really had a good feel for that the music itself would sort of be the spine of the piece, the underlying material, and then what we would add to it would be a natural outgrowth of the music and the movement that already exists. And that's exactly the way we approached it. Mm-hmm. So it was really fun to toss around ideas at the beginning and think, well, exactly how are we going to put this technology stuff with the percussion in this particular piece? And we had quite a number of ideas, but eventually settled on putting a scrim, a transparent scrim, in front of the players and creating some images that would be triggered by the player's movement and by the audio of the piece, by the sounds of the piece, especially, for instance, these big accents that would happen, and projecting these images essentially right on top of the players. So you literally are adding a layer of visual image right on top of the visual image that you already are seeing in the percussionist movement. Mm-hmm. And from there, we had several wild ideas to incorporate live video. Of course, we started down several paths that then didn't pan out. The more we worked with it, the more we sort of pared it down to an essential. And I remember one of our guide phrases was "less is more," mm-hmm. is what we finally ended up with. And really just using a piece that made use of lines and dots as visual material, and how much you could do with lines and dots. Dots could become falling snow, or they could explode into a constellation of stars in the sky around the players. They could be larger dots that sort of tracked the player's movement as they moved their sticks. These dots overhead would sort of scan their movement. The lines could be anything from branches of a tree that would sort of reach out and reach toward the players, or they could be scribbles over the whole screen that would envelop the players and sort of the players, it's almost as if you're sort of scribbling right on the whole look of the piece, and that in fact is how it ends, with these big, we call them scribbles, all over the players.
And I know that especially as we brainstormed it here with this group hack.art.lab, the constraints were, the challenge is this is a very successful piece that already exists in its own right. And it's not really lacking anything. So we didn't want to just put frosting on a cake that already had frosting, and so that was a lot the trick of working with this piece.
And here we go back to the history of this piece, the video wall that was done back in the late 80s, which was one of the points of entree to say, all right, 20 some years ago, this piece existed as a huge video wall
And I think one thing that helped was in talking to you, Mary Ellen, and realizing that you were very open and wanting to explore what was possible with this. And that really helped us to be able to actually think about it, versus, well, this is kind of my work and this is the way it looks and it was kind of done,
And don't touch it, yeah. No, I was totally open and, and very impressed that you wanted to be so respectful of what was already there, so that, as you said, not to put frosting on something that doesn't need it or already has it, but really thinking about what layer can we put on this piece that will take what's already there and amplify it, I think is one way we were thinking of it, or just give life to something else that is a natural outgrowth of what already is there. And we talked a lot about that balance of making sure that the music sort of stays primary in a way, that we don't get so caught up in these animations that it then becomes, it's all about the animations. And so there are certain places in the piece where there's not a lot going on visually in the animations, and that's to kind of bring the eye and the focus back to the players themselves, because it is first and foremost a live performance piece with the players performing the music. So I think we found a nice balance there. I was really happy with it.
In this work, part of my own exploration was, is it possible to create something that's clearly synthetic? And, we have these masses and these dots. There's nothing, that they look like in the real world, but yet maybe having some sort of motion that would suggest something more organic. And the way that it seemed to explore something like that is to create the kinds of environment that we live in, create things like gravity, create things like inertia, things like resistance and forces, and somebody pushes you, where does that come from? Those kinds of explorations. And then every time something like that happens in the world, the result is the result is always just a little bit different. So that's the same with our video. Even if the timing and everything were exactly the same every time, the video will always be different, because the actual environment is what's creating all the motion, rather than the motion being dictated itself. And so that, I think, created more work for me. It also, at times, was, I think, frustrating for us, because, it's perfect now.
Do it the same way again next time.
But each time it'd be different.
Right. I guess there was a lot of trial and error that happened there. We were talking about primarily putting something on the sticks in order to pick up the movement of the sticks. And because they move quickly and there's a lot of force that comes from the drum head that travels through the stick, it needed to be something that was both rugged and sensitive enough to pick up the actual motion of the sticks. So we tried a lot of different things, using parts from Wiimotes, which we didn't end up actually using, and eventually settled on infrared LEDs. So they emitted infrared light, which was picked up by hacked PS2 webcams, and then you could see where the sticks were moving. And so I worked on the hardware that was attached to the sticks and also on the webcams that picked up that light, so that information could be read by the software.
Jerry Scholl, who Michael Holland here has already talked about, leads the percussion ensemble here at Wichita State. And he chose the students as the leader of the percussion ensemble. He works with all of the percussion students here. And he chose the students that worked on this piece. I think he chose well.
Yes. Very well.
They perform really well, and they also have incredible patience. Hold on, we got to try that again. Hold on, we had a technical difficulty, we have to try that again. Oh, can you play your instrument a little bit differently because the webcam isn't picking it up? Things like that.
For many hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They gave up whole weekends, and when I mean whole weekends, I don't mean 9 to 5. I mean 9 to...
weekends, yeah.
From Friday afternoon through Sunday night, yeah.
Jerry Scholl was fantastic in sort of directing the piece musically and rehearsing it with them. And then for all of them to really look at exactly how are they moving, how is the piece going to work dynamically, just before we even add in any of the animation, but really kind of looking at it on a very detailed level. They're really playing at a high level of musicality.
I really love the still life piece. When we first started working on it and taking a look at it, it was unlike anything we'd ever done before, so it was really new for us. But every time I play it, it seems like I love it even more. And I think it's probably the marriage of motion and rhythm that really makes this piece special to me personally. I have a background in dance, so I was really happy to be able to kind of revisit that concept in this piece. And I also really was encouraged by the feedback that we got whenever we played it for an audience, because there's a difference between playing so that people can just hear the music and playing so that they can see it.
Working with the technology and all the stuff, we had microphones and we had LED lights, and we had to make some physical changes for the project and volume changes for the mics, you know, so that they would catch what was going on musically and acoustically. So that would be another thing. You know, just being able to change up what your muscle memory has been doing the whole time.
My hope for the piece was just that people would enjoy it, and that's one of the things I love about music, is that it's purely just enjoyment for other people. It's more selfless than other types of occupations out there, where it's more about someone bringing in the bacon or providing for themselves. But for music, it's more about providing for the community and for other people, for their enjoyment. And so for me and my hopes for the piece, it was just to develop a really, really good show, for us to get the music down as best as we could and to learn all of the notes, the articulations, and all the dynamics, but then to team up with the hack.art.lab, and then also working with Mary Ellen Child and Jerry, and then putting that all together and to develop a really great show for the audience.
I do hope that people have an emotional experience with it, that they see something or hear something or experience something that they don't know how to give words to. I also hope that inspires some other work. I mean, you mentioned already that we all have the creative spirit in us, and maybe it's the educator part of me, but one of the most rewarding things that can happen for me is when somebody comes and says, I want to do that. How do you do that? Just give me a taste of how that's possible, get me started, or tell me where to look, or I'm doing work that's something like this, or just that kind of thing where somebody is inspired in some way to create.
Yeah, I'd love it when the audience feels drawn in, completely drawn into the piece. And then if we surprise them, if we do something in the next moment that they hadn't seen coming, and it actually creates in them a visceral and an emotional response.
We're not using any bizarre instruments in this. We're using conventional instruments in unconventional ways. And once you cross that threshold, you've thrown the door open.
Well, this project has been such a pleasure to work on. I know we're going to be working more together, and I want to thank you guys so much for working with us here at Wichita State University, working with hack.art.lab, Michael Holland from Vortex, at Vanderbilt, and Mary Ellen Childs in Minneapolis. So it's just been wonderful to work with you guys, and I hope we work together more.
I look forward to the next project.
Definitely, yeah, this is only a beginning.